Well, when I left you guys last week, I was hoping we'd have some positive Pirates and Penguins news to talk in this week's show. And we have news. Shortly after I posted last week's show, the Penguins went on to lose Game 3 5-1, and that would end up being a turning point in the series. After that game, Mike Sullivan went with a decision to go back to his number one guy in Matt Murray, and there's been no looking back ever since. They went on to win the next two games, and they had an opportunity to close it out in Game 6, but they didn't get the job done. In Game 6, I was certain that they were going to close out the series in Game 6, but something in the back of my head told me, maybe this will go to a Game 7. If I'm certain of one thing, it wasn't NHL player safety telling me that, because that would involve them saying something other than, we will not have a hearing with insert player name here for his hit on insert opponent player name here. So it definitely wasn't NHL player safety that told me there would be a Game 7, but something in the back of my head told me that. So that does bring us now to Game 7, and I do think the Penguins are going to close out the series in Game 7 and advance to the Stanley Cup Finals, where they will face Nashville. Here's what you have to look at. They still have Sid, who's looked pretty good in this series. They still have Gina, who's been playing with the puck on a string the last couple games. I mean, he just looks dominant, and he even said, I should have had more than one goal in Game 6. So I would look for both of those guys to step up because it is a Game 7. Also still have Stanley Cup champion Phil Kessel. And Mr. Elimination Game, Brian Rust. Hopefully he gets it done again. These are the moments that he likes to step up. Another possible bright spot of news for Game 7 is the fact that Mike Sullivan left Ottawa saying it is reasonable to expect Justin Schultz and Patrick Hornquist would be available for Game 7, which is good news. I mean, you know what both guys bring to the table. The defense could use some help. Justin Schultz would bring a right-hand shot into the lineup. And Patrick Hornquist is just a guy that, you know, he's a net front presence, and I really do think they need that because they have 14 goals in this series, and 7 of the 14 goals were scored in one game. So they need more goal production, and Patrick Hornquist is such a pest in front of the net, and I really do think he could help out in Game 7 if he's healthy and if he's available to get back into the lineup. I would look for them to have another sound game at home, take Game 7 at home, and advance to the Stanley Cup Finals, where they would face Nashville, and we'll talk a little bit more about Nashville later on. Now let's talk a little bit about the Pirates. So since last show, they did end up taking 2 series against the Phillies and the Nationals, and now they're playing for a split with the Braves. They don't have a lot of tough opponents coming up, so this is really a point where they could gain some ground, and they really need to, because so far the NL Central has been a lackluster division, and they just need to take advantage of the opportunities that they have right now. As I also said in last week's show, I didn't think Andrew McCutchen would get back to his dominant performance that he has been capable of before, and as of right now he has a .200 average, and I wouldn't say that he's playing as bad as his average is showing, but at the same time he's not an MVP candidate either. So I still think he needs to improve his play. He isn't doing terrible, but he still needs to play better than he is right now if he wants to be the leader of this team. The other thing to look at is the fact that Austin Meadows still at 2 home runs, still batting in the .220, so he's not kicking down the door to come into the pros like a lot of people thought he would this season. Guess what guy is having a pretty solid rookie year, though? Josh Bell. Right now, Bell's carrying a .254 average with 9 home runs. He also has an OPS of .853. I mean, he's pacing to have over 30 home runs this season. Both Bleacher Report and Ken Rosenthal of Fox Sports predicted Josh Bell to be the National League Rookie of the Year. They might have been on to something because it looks like he possibly could have a Rookie of the Year performance if he keeps up the play that he's been having as of late. There was also something interesting that I wanted to talk about. I was having a discussion with Ryan, who is my friend and who asks questions for the show, you know, almost all the time. I'm sure you've heard me answer his questions before, but I was talking to him, and there is a strange parallel between a member of the Pirates and a member of the Penguins. The players that I'm talking about in particular are Garrett Cole and Marc-Andre Fleury. And here are the parallels that I found between these two guys. First off, both are players that can be associated with the resurgence of their respective teams. Garrett Cole was obviously a piece that helped bring the Pirates back to the playoffs. Marc-Andre Fleury was one of the big pieces that helped the Penguins also get back into the playoffs. And both have also had moments in their careers where they weren't at the top of their game whenever their team needed them to be. Garrett Cole posted a 2.45 ERA in the 2013 playoffs, and then he ended up being the starter in the 2015 wildcard game against the Cubs, and he gave up 4 runs over 5 innings, so it necessarily wasn't a dominant performance that they had from when they needed him to. I believe we're still waiting on Kyle Schwarber's home run to land from that game. And for Marc-Andre Fleury, after they won the Cup, the next few years after, he didn't even have a save percentage of over 900 in the playoffs. So he was a guy that had a rough couple years after winning a championship. These are also 2 guys, though, that have had points in their career where they have been dominant and they just haven't gotten the necessary support from their team. For Garrett Cole, right now, he has the second best ERA on the Pirates pitching staff, but he also has the second worst win-loss percentage. He's been going out there and having dominating performances and not getting the necessary run support from his teammates. Now you look at Marc-Andre Fleury in the playoffs this year. The Penguins have been outshot, if not every game, just about every game that Marc-Andre Fleury was in net. They also weren't giving him the goal support that he needed. They needed to rely on him having some dominant performances in net to close out some games. And he ended up becoming the scapegoat in a couple of situations this postseason, all because his team wasn't scoring enough goals. Now you have Matt Murray in net, and in the 3 games that he started, they've outshot their opponents. So, both guys haven't necessarily always gotten the best performance offensively out of their teams whenever they've been doing pretty well. And finally, the sad part to the parallel is the fact that possibly neither guy will finish their careers in Pittsburgh. Marc-Andre Fleury, everybody's predicting he's probably going to be traded in the offseason or maybe taken in the expansion draft by Vegas. And Garrett Cole, he's a Scott Boras client. Obviously, he's going to be seeking a big contract, and nobody's really expecting the Pirates to pay it. So I would say that he's probably out the door within the next couple years. There is one difference, however. Marc-Andre Fleury has a couple of these. Garrett Cole does not have any championships. Yet. Maybe. Now I want to talk NBA playoffs for a couple minutes. So the Warriors swept the Spurs. They're going on to represent the West in the NBA Finals. And then you have the Cavaliers, who dropped the game to the Celtics. And it looks like they're still going to take it in 5, though, and represent the East in the NBA Finals. But the one thing that really bugged me was the fact that LeBron, he had 11 points in the game that they did drop to the Celtics in this series, and just everybody got on his case about it. It's just, whenever he loses, there's people that come out of the woodwork and say, oh, look what he did, look what he did. And one stat that was shared with me, of course, was, oh, this was LeBron's 6th playoff game where he didn't have at least 15 points. Michael Jordan never did that in his career. You know what else Michael Jordan never did in his career? He never played in the finals and led both teams in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. LeBron did. He also never went undefeated in the first round in his career. If I recall, he had 3 losses in the first round in his career. Guess who hasn't lost in the first round in their career yet? LeBron. LeBron James also took Larry Hughes, Sasha Pavlovich, Drew Gooden, and Zydrunas Ilgauskas to the NBA Finals at the age of 22. You know what Michael Jordan was doing at the age of 22? Getting swept in the first round of the playoffs. His first playoff team that he took to the finals at the age of 28, and he had Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, John Paxson, and Bill Cartwright. So you could pull out as many stats as you want saying that LeBron James isn't Michael Jordan. Maybe by the time he retires from the NBA, he won't be Michael Jordan. He'll be better. He'll retire as the greatest NBA player to ever play the game. Only time will tell, though. I calculated it out, and if he wants to finish the all-time leading scorer, I believe at the rate that he's been scoring, it'll take him about 6.5 seasons to do so. So as long as he plays until about 38, 39, he's at least going to retire as the leading scorer of all time. And I would imagine he's at least going to get one more championship before he retires. At least one more. We do, however, have an NBA question in this week's social media segment, so let's get to it. So Jared asks for this week's show, who will win the NBA Finals? Well, let's look at the starting fives of each team. For the Cavs, you have Kyrie, J.R. Smith, LeBron, Love, and Tristan Thompson. For the Warriors, you have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, JaVale McGee. Well, the biggest difference between this year's finals and last year's finals is obviously the fact that Kevin Durant joined the Warriors, and he's been doing pretty well for them in the playoffs. However, he averaged 31, 6, and 2 against the Heat in the 2012 NBA Finals, and still lost in 5 games. But this is a pretty stacked Warriors team. They haven't lost yet in the playoffs, and in order for the Cavs to win in the finals this year, LeBron is going to have another performance like he has the last 2 years, in which he should have won NBA Finals the last 2 years. 2 years ago, whenever the Warriors won the finals, I still think he should have won playoff MVP, but it is what it is. I also think Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving, they also both need to be at the top of their games. They also have guys on the team like Darren Williams, Kyle Korver, J.R. Smith. Those are 3 guys that they might not see the ball a lot, but whenever they do, they need to make sure they're executing well with the ball and they're making their shots fall. So as for my prediction of who I think will win the NBA Finals, as long as the Cavs advance, which I do think they will, I can't pick against the greatest player in the NBA. I just can't. I think the Cavs are going to get it done again this year. They're going to repeat, and it's going to take 7 games again. So Cavs in 7 is my prediction. Our next question comes from Mike, and Mike asks, given Nashville's recent loss of Ryan Johansson, are they now a better matchup for the Penguins in a potential Stanley Cup Finals? Well, I want to reference something that Keith Jones said. And for those of you who don't know Keith Jones, he covers the NHL for NBC. You see him during the intermissions and the pregame, postgame shows. He did a radio interview. I want to say it was before the Washington series with 93.7 The Fan. And in that interview, he pointed out one thing, because he was, I believe, the only guy from NBC to pick the Penguins in that series. And he said you have to look at it this way. Your centers are maybe your most important players on your team whenever it's playoff time. And the Penguins have Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Nick Bonino, and Matt Cullen as their centers. Now you look at the Predators. They have Mike Fisher, where it's questionable if he'll return in the playoffs this year. Even at that, he wasn't really being effective for the Predators. You also have Ryan Johansson, who was really effective, who was playing as the best center on the team, and he's out for the remainder of the playoffs. They still have Philip Forsberg. They still have PK Subban. They have a good defensive core. Not to mention the fact that they've gotten to the Stanley Cup Finals on the back of Pekka Rinne. So they still have a solid team, but I do think if the Penguins take Game 7 and they advance, and it's Penguins-Predators in the Stanley Cup Finals, I still think it would be a very tight series. Our final question this week comes from Mark. Mark asks, after watching the Erie Otters and the Windsor Spitfires so far in the Memorial Cup playoffs, are you still confident in your championship pick, and why? Well, in last week's show, obviously I picked the Windsor Spitfires, the host city of the Memorial Cup, to win, and I talked about the talent that they have, and I talked about their goaltending play. So far in the Memorial Cup, out of the top 10 scorers, Erie has 5, Windsor has 3, but Windsor still has the best goalie in the Memorial Cup in Michael DiPietro. He's currently leading all goalies with a 150 goals against average. So, Mark, I will say this. A noble captain stays with his ship no matter what. So if it sinks, I will go down with the ship. I am sticking with my pick of Windsor. Well, obviously, as I said in last week's show, I hope I have some good Penguins news to talk about with you guys in next week's show. Hopefully, I'm talking about them in the Stanley Cup Finals. But before I go, I do want to point out my new shirt. Just got it in the mail. I'm already loading up on my James Conner gear for the Steelers season, and let me stand up and give you a little look at this. Oh, yeah, Beast Mode 2.0, James Conner, Connor Strong, Dirty 30. Love this shirt from Pittsburgh Clothing Company. If you want to purchase one today, go to their website, pghclothing.com. Have a great week. Today's show is brought to you by Shaw's Bait Company. For more information, please visit their Facebook page.